Confidence, confidence, confident. I can be confident, confidence, confidence, confident. I can be confident at work.
Hello and welcome to the Confident at Work podcast. I'm your host and your confidence coach, Anna Manning, and today we're talking about quiet power, introversion, confidence, and leadership. So back in 2020 maybe, I led a session for the She Says Network called Quiet Power. The She Says Network is filled with women who work in advertising, creative industries, that kind of thing. And they found that they are surrounded by very extroverted, kind of loud, bold personality types a lot of the time. But there were many of them who identified as introverts and felt a little bit different. And the She Says Network wanted to give them a space and a time to think about their own quiet power. And I always meant to do a podcast episode for you about it because so many of my clients would identify with being introverts. But this is going to be useful for you whether or not you identify with that label. Many high-performing, thoughtful professionals, definitely the ones that I work with, are introverts. And there is often a tension, which is that they feel like the world of work wasn't built for how they like to do things and how they like to operate. Now, full disclosure, I am not an introvert. People often think that I am actually when they come and speak to me. And I don't really like labels and binaries. I fucking hate personality tests of all kinds. But when I've done them in the past, they have told me that I am an extrovert. And I definitely get my energy from spending time with people. However, I also like to spend a lot of time alone and I need to rebuild on my own in the quiet. So who knows, maybe I'm an ambivert, if that is such a thing. But this isn't about me. This is about you. And it's specifically about confidence because the position that a lot of people have is that confidence sounds like or looks like loudness, speed of thinking, constant visibility. But I don't think that's what confidence is. I think confidence is self-trust, is impact, even when and if you are largely quiet. So we're going to talk a bit today about Susan Cain's book, Quiet, Power of Introverts in a World That Can't Stop Talking. We're going to talk about this kind of extroverted ideal that some of us can have in our minds and actually how that relates to the organizations that maybe we work in. And I want to take you through some particular issues that I've noticed for my more introverted clients. So let's start with Susan Cain's book. Now, you may have read this, or you might have read this, or you might not. But she talks about how and I know there's people listening to this podcast all over the world, but she's talking about Western specific organizations. They are designed around what she calls an extrovert ideal. So valuing quick thinking, assertiveness, group brainstorming, everybody talking, visibility, everybody getting together. And her idea, her thinking, which very much is in line with my thinking, is that in that world, people can think that introversion is some kind of deficit or is a problem that needs to be solved, or it is not the ideal. And she very much wants to say that introversion is no deficit. It's a different way of operating, and it is good. It is a good way of operating. And for many of my clients, and I specifically talk to people about this when they're getting more senior and when they're in leadership positions, they might not actually be lacking confidence, but they might be lacking confidence in their own way of doing things, in their kind of natural style, whether that is being a bit more considered, a bit quieter, not just talking for talking's sake, wanting to think about things and consider things with a bit of time and a bit of space rather than just shooting from the hip. And whether that is needing in those kind of big work days and big conferences and big group things, needing actually downtime and time to kind of regulate again after those times that might take up a lot of energy. So this extrovert ideal at work, it's not an ideal, but this is how Susan Cain talks about it. I think that in the workplaces I've worked in, I can recognize this. See if you can too. So common signals that we might get from the world of work or from our organizations is that we need to speak up more, we need to be more visible, we need to be able to think on our feet, we need to be able to network, we need to be able to go into rooms with a lot of people and make an impression, make an impact, all of these things. And okay, all of those things could be good, could be true. But the subtle messaging to people who are introverted might be who you are isn't right at senior level. You've got to be someone else. Like this introvert thing, that's not going to work. You're never going to get ahead, get on, be noticed, be respected, progress. And this leads to 3 very common confidence struggles, issues that come up for my clients who feel and see themselves as more introverted. And the first one of those issues is I need to become more extroverted as I get more senior. Or I need to pretend, at least, fit in to this extroverted ideal at work. So the belief is as I get more senior, I'm going to have a bigger personality. I'm going to have to be a louder presence. I'm going to have to take up more airtime. Now, don't get me wrong, there will be things that you need to do. You may now have to stand up in front of people to give updates. You may have to be part of a panel on a roadshow. There may be more things now that require you to be more visible and to speak more as well as listen. Yes, that may be true. However, I do still think that you can do all of that as the person that you are. We don't need everybody in the room to be the loud one who is shooting from the hip and talking over people and obsessed with the sound of their own voice. I very much feel like we need people to be, one of my clients called it the grounding anchor. We were thinking about who are you in the room? Who are you in those moments? What do your strengths, your quiet power, what does your quiet power as an introvert actually bring? And she could see there was so much in there. This calmness, this anchoring, this considered, this measured. And it was powerful. So think about that. Because I think senior leadership actually requires thoughtfulness. It requires listening. It requires calm decision making. It sometimes requires strategic restraint. And that is perfect for someone who has quiet power. So, in order to be confident in a more senior position, I don't think it requires you to become more extroverted, but I do think that it requires you to trust that your way of doing things is legitimate. It might even require you to look at some of the subtle programming that might have gone in over the years that's told you need to be more like X, Y, and Z, and really put that up to a bit of scrutiny and think, do I? Are there other leaders that I admire who are thoughtful, listen, and who just might be an introvert too? Just might be harnessing their quiet power. Because let's be right, if you're trying to perform, like do a performance of extroversion, probably not going to go that well anyway. You probably end up as some very weird version of yourself because 1, it's exhausting. You can't keep it up. And 2, it is fake. So it's definitely going to make you feel uncomfortable. So you're probably maybe going to act a bit weird rather than sitting back into who you are, feeling that quiet power or being, as my client called it, that grounding anchor presence. Oof, do we not need that presence in our workplaces and in our world? We so do. So, what if your way of doing things, your natural way, is so sorely needed within your organization, within your team, within your leadership team? That is worth thinking about. The second issue that I see from all my more introverted clients is bullshitting, which is like kind of my paraphrasing for thinking on the spot and talking fast. And maybe there's a bit of a cultural bias that says fast answers equal intelligence. Being able to bullshit is a necessary skill. And very often my introverted clients will choose to think before they speak. They would rather have depth over speed. They might be more likely to pause. They might be more likely to want to know what's on that agenda ahead of time so they can think about things and consider things that are going to be really useful rather than just speaking some bullshit off the cuff. Now, this can sometimes get conflated. This is not about feeling panicky in those moments and that being the reason why you can't answer. It's actually, I'd rather give that some depth and some real consideration rather than just say something off the cuff. Pre-thinking rather than winging it. And I think being able to own some silence rather than think that's a bad thing or apologizing for it. It doesn't get done very much. But what if it did? What if you owned, I'm going to take a moment to think about that, and then took it? It's a quiet power move. And generally, people will kind of go along with it. The third issue that I see is the networking, conferences, high stimulation environments. You might know, if you're an introvert, that these environments can be kind of draining, right? They're draining for me, even though I'm an extrovert, actually. If I've spent all day at a conference, yes, I will be buzzy and I'll have enjoyed it, but I will be utterly drained in the evening. What's it like for you? Noise, crowds, constant interaction. No real quiet spaces or consideration ever of the fact that some people need a bit of downtime, need to be able to just sit. Actually, one client did once tell me that there was a zone for people who just needed a bit of time out at a conference where it was a quiet room. And she said, "Oh, wow, amazing." So I went in there and this guy came, this guy came and sat next to me and was like, "Oh, now that I've got a moment for quiet," and just like blathered at her. She was like, "Oh my God, this totally like defeats the point of what I was trying to do here." However, if she'd have really been believing that her way of doing things was really legitimate and taking what she needed in that moment, she would have said to him, "Can I stop you there? This is a moment of quiet that I'm taking. So you need to find me another time." But the common internal narratives that happen on a day like that is, well, everyone else seems to be fine. I just, need to push through. That need for energy management you might feel as a lack of confidence. And I'm not saying that people don't have particular confidence challenges on days like this. But this kind of environment, which is more difficult for someone who feels themselves to be introverted, can just make a confidence problem worse, or can exist completely outside of any confidence problem whatsoever. So what if you don't need to attend everything or meet everyone? What if there are ways of nurturing and creating a network that doesn't do as much of this high stimulation, everybody together, everybody talking, everybody on all day? What if there was a way of doing things that would be more your way of doing things? When I was leading that quiet power event, there was a panel afterwards and people were talking about networking specifically. And these were people who'd, been quite successful in their careers. And one of the reasons why was because they had really strong networks and they were doing things their way. They were having conversations more one-on-one. And the way they saw it, it was deeper, more authentic conversations rather than loads of bullshitty, shallow ones. They were genuinely interested in the people that they were with and that they were listening to. And they genuinely cared about them and the relationship. And that is more powerful than some bullshit chit chat. So can you think about doing networking, quote unquote, in a way that really plays to your quiet power and your strengths and the way that you connect with people and maintain those connections? How do you like to do that? And maybe that way is way better than the way you've been forcing yourself into trying. I wonder if you could get together with other introverted leaders. What kind of environment would you choose? Kind of meet up would you want? Best believe it would look different than the general noisy conference day or noisy networking situation that we're all used to. And if you do have to do those, if that is part of your job and it is an expectation, then thinking about building in recovery time, not traveling there with people, not having to sit and talk to people on the train all the way there, taking a little bit of time for yourself if you can, and knowing that at the end of the day, you're going to have to crash out and recharge in the quiet. Fine. If you were confident with that. Maybe it would mean leaving early without guilt. Or maybe it would just mean knowing that you couldn't do as much the day after. If you honoured and respected your way of doing things and your needs around that, would you be making any little adjustments or changing things entirely? Some things to think about. Because I don't believe that confidence is loud and constant and like a performance. I believe that confidence is self-trust. It is a quiet power. That includes trusting who you are and how you do things and seeing the strength in that. It is about having clarity about how you do your best work and who you are in that, and knowing that that's not only okay, it is good. You can have a lot of influence without making a lot of noise. And you can command a lot of authority without doing a performance. All of those things, I think, come from quiet power. So I hope that you don't need to become someone else in order to succeed. If you would like to come and work with me, I work with many introverted leaders and mid-senior people to help them develop their own belief in their quiet power and their way of doing things, and to feel confident with that. And that is work that I love to do because I believe wholeheartedly that our workplaces and our organisation and our world needs that kind of power, that kind of presence, that kind of influence. And if you're interested in doing that kind of work with me, then head to the link in the show notes and book a call to ask me about private coaching. And I will see you in next week's episode. Bye.
Confidence, confidence, confidence. I can be confident. Confidence, confidence, confidence. I can be confident at work.